Since mid-June, in fact, Pakistan has been battling with one of the most severe, totally anomalous cyclones of territorial monsoon weather. Rainfall during this period has been equivalent to 3 times the 30-year national average, with many areas challenged with facing down 5 to 6 times and even more. Before that, Pakistan's heat wave crossed global records for redefining a no-spring seasonal change, with mercury crossing 53 degrees centigrade in the province of Sindh, while triggering glacial lake outbursts, floods in our northern areas, home to the largest number of glaciers outside the polar region. The current cycle of super flooding we see today then is part of these extreme weather patterns. Unprecedented levels of cloudbursts, torrential and uninterrupted rain have caused widespread devastation, triggering both urban flooding, river floods, hill torrents, landslides, resulting in the loss of human lives, livelihoods and livestock, and severe damage to property and infrastructure. Southern, central and northern Pakistan have been the worst affected, particularly Balochistan and Sindh. It is feared that the scale will exceed that of the 2010 mega floods or super floods. Nature is sending us all a new message, and because of its geographical location and a confluence of other vectors, Pakistan has become the ground zero of this century's biggest existential threat, global warming. In some areas, the water is just everywhere, in an unbroken horizon of inundation. 72 districts have been declared calamity hit. Over 33 million people have been affected, which is the size of a small country. More than 1,100, including women and children, have lost their lives, and many more are injured. Livelihoods are severely impacted with the loss of livestock, not to mention crop losses, among other crucial sources of sustenance. Hundreds of thousands of women, children and men have been displaced and forced to spend days and nights in camps and open areas under a merciless sky. Lack of access to food, clean water, shelter, and basic health care is making life harder for them with each passing day. Critical infrastructure, roads, bridges, and railway networks have been seriously damaged and destroyed. This is impeding our efforts for delivery of aid and transportation of affectees to safer locations. The situation is likely to deteriorate even further as heavy rains continue over areas already inundated by more than 2 months of storm and flooding. For us, this is no less than a national emergency. For the most vulnerable, especially the women and children impacted by this disaster, this is a life-defining experience. Excellencies, I've personally visited many of the flood-hit areas. Words cannot describe what it feels like to see people displaced from their own homes while mourning the loss of their loved ones. I've seen the pain, anguish, and suffering in their eyes, having literally lost everything they owned, now waiting for the next food pack, unsure about their futures. They are looking up to us for survival and to rebuild their lives and livelihoods. In addition to the human misery, these extraordinary floods have taken a severe toll on the economy and further stretched our limited resources. Excellencies, the government of Pakistan is cognizant of its responsibilities and has been leading the humanitarian response with invaluable support from the United Nations and humanitarian partners. As part of our national efforts, we've earmarked $173 million to help flood-affected people through direct cash transfers. This will be dispersed through the Benazir Income Support Program to 1.5 million families who will each receive 25,000 rupees in immediate cash relief. Rupees 5 billion has been allocated to the national disaster management authorities for relief efforts. The government is also providing 1 million rupees in compensation for next of kin of the deceased, 250,000 rupees for injury and for partial damage of houses, 500,000 rupees for destroyed houses. In addition to financial support, food packs, shelter items including tents and water, sanitation and hygiene supplies are also being provided by the national disaster management authorities and the provincial disaster management authorities. The government's efforts are being supported by the Pakistani nation, with people, civil society and humanitarian organizations stepping forward in a big way to complement the relief work with our characteristic generosity and philanthropic spirit. The Prime Minister's Relief Fund 2022 has also been established to facilitate people all over the country and to contribute to the flood relief efforts. Excellencies, but as it is evident, this disaster is colossal in its scale and devastation. It has severely strained, even overwhelmed, both our resources and our capacity. It has left millions vulnerable to health emergencies and a critical lack of basic survival needs. The gap between such needs and the capacity to deliver with speed and scale is crucial at this point. It requires urgent cooperation and support from the international community. We are profoundly grateful for the initial round of spontaneous solidarity and support from so many of our friends and partners around the world. I would like to acknowledge and thank all our friends for the prompt financial support and relief assistance being provided by several countries as well as the United Nations, World Bank and Asian Development Bank. We are especially grateful to the United Nations resident coordinator and his team for the excellent support that has been extended to us since the onset of this calamity. We need to expand and scale up these efforts and response. For that, we are launching the UN Flash Appeal for Pakistan Flood Response Plan 2022 today. The appeal prioritizes focused interventions in areas of education, food security, agriculture, health, nutrition, protection, shelter, and non-food items, water, sanitation, and hygiene. We also need assistance with livelihoods and livestock support, as well as relief, machinery, and equipment. We urgently need shelter and tents and mosquito nets, if they can be arranged and transported. This appeal is expected to address only part of the overall requirements and will therefore complement the broader effort. I would like to urge the international community to give its full backing to the Flash Appeal to help the people of Pakistan most in need. I hope our partners would appreciate that given the urgent requirements of this catastrophe and the compounded burden on our economy, the humanitarian assistance being offered does not cut into the already committed development assistance. Beyond the immediate rescue and relief efforts, we would need support for rehabilitation and reconstruction of the flood-affected areas. I encourage you to contribute generously towards meeting the funding requirements of this response plan and going beyond. We believe that the efforts of the United Nations will be boosted by swift offers and announcements of support from your countries. Excellencies, the calamity we are facing is a clear manifestation of the direct and unmitigated consequences of climate change. As one of the smallest emitters on the planet, less than 1% of greenhouse gases. In fact, Pakistan is in the front line of the devastation caused by global warming. This mega flood has once again made us acutely aware of our vulnerability to recurring climate shocks. Such episodes are becoming all too frequent and increasingly more devastating. I hope you will agree that both the spirit of climate justice as well as humanitarian assistance, the international community needs to step up and share the burden with those most affected and impacted by rapidly changing climate and weather patterns. Your full support and solidarity with the people of Pakistan at this time would go a long way to alleviating their suffering and in helping to rebuild their lives, resilience and communities. I thank you and look forward to working with all of you to build